Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Breeze Time with Kathy. Well, today I'm going to continue part two of my trip to Sicily that I took in 2016. My uncle and I drove across, rented a car, and we drove across Sicily. Well, this is part two of my trip to Sicily in 2016. Sicily, of course, is located right here. If you remember last week, I told you that I flew into Rome where I met my uncle. He lives half the year in Rome. After he retired as a college professor, uh, he uh, he spends half the year living in Rome and half the year living in the States until the pandemic, and he's been here in Philadelphia for the last year and a half. But anyway, from there we took a commuter flight and we flew down to Catania. From Catania, we rented a car, and it was a standard transmission car, which I can drive a standard, but it's been a long time. And going up, the first thing we did was we went to the top of Mount Etna, the highest active volcano in all of Europe, and I nearly burned out the clutch. From there, we drove down to Syracuse, which is the ancient city of Syracuse, in the days when Greater Greece ruled the area, and it was a Greek colony in about 500, founded about 500 BC. I talked about that last week, and now today, in today's time, we begin as we head out driving across Sicily, and we're heading to Piazza Armerina. And the attraction in Piazza Armerina is a great Roman villa that has been discovered. Of course, we used a GPS device in order to get there. I felt much better than that because I'd been on a trip with my uncle before, and his map reading skills was not so great sometimes. We'd roam around for an hour looking for our hotel. I'll have to tell him not to watch this particular episode. But anyway, anyway, my uncle did not like this machine because when it was set in English, it didn't pronounce any of the Italian names properly. And it was set in Italian. He said it still didn't do a good job, though it worked fine to get us where we needed to go in Sicily. As soon as he got back to Rome, he sold it. He didn't want it anymore. Well, this is the great villa, and it was indeed huge, even for that day. It dates back to about the year 340 AD, and it was obviously the property of a powerful Roman family. It shows signs of course, great wealth, and it even has the symbol of the tetrarchs inside. And a tetrarch was someone who was basically a mayor of Rome. And they were always extremely wealthy and extremely powerful. And this was part of their country. This was their country estate. And it was fantastic. Now, of course, it's now in ruins. This is what it looks like now. You can see a hint of the outline. But what these are, actually, these are glass houses. This is glass enclosures, like greenhouses, except there's no plants inside. Instead, what it's protecting are the fantastic mosaic floors that were uncovered. This is what it looks like. Some of the columns have been set upright again, and some things are there. But what happened apparently was in about 150 years or so after it was built, there was a huge mudslide, and the whole villa was covered with mud. It was completely covered in mud, and it was abandoned. And the area was turned back into farmland, and it remained pretty much undisturbed, with only a few pieces of building sticking up, just enough for people to know where it was, and they sort of farmed around it. But there wasn't a whole lot of excavation done until the 19th and late 19th and early 20th centuries. And even then, they didn't discover the great wealth of the villa. And it's not wealth in terms of money. That had all been any furnishings or artifacts. Most of those had been carried off in antiquity. So had a lot of the stone that was above the ground, because they wanted to use it. It was repurposed for building. But what they did was, what they discovered was the mud had preserved the mosaics. Now, this is our guide. I at first was going to rent one of these little things you see Uncle Chick wearing, where they tell you all about it. But I got in a conversation with this man. His name is Valerio Salernos, and Salernos, and he actually grew up in the area. And as a boy, he worked for the archaeologists. And as a teenager, he worked for the archaeologists who were doing major excavation on the villa back in the 1950s and 1960s. And he was there for a lot of the discovery of the very famous floors that are there now. It was kind of neat because he had photographs of himself at the site, and he had photographs of things as they were first discovered, and also with the famous archaeologists who worked on the site. Well, the mosaic floors are, of course, the great attraction. Here's an example of the mosaic floor. This is a simple geometric pattern. This kind of pattern was in the kitchens and the service areas, the places that the guests and the patrons of the house would rarely, if ever, go, and the owners would very rarely go. So this was considered plain and just sort of general purpose. It was like the downstairs, if you're talking about the way the servants' areas, like in Downton Abbey, how all the opulence is upstairs, where the noble family lives, and the downstairs is for the servants, and everything's nice but plain. And this was considered plain. There's over Valerio explained to us there's over 37,000 square feet of mosaics. This is an example of one of the more decorative mosaics. This is what it looks like regular. And of course, he said, though, the colors were originally more brilliant, and they can be more brilliant. And then right behind us, another guide brought his group over, and he poured water on it, something Valerio didn't like, because he said it can, over time, it'll damage the mosaics. But you can see how it really brings out the colors. This is the way it's laid out, so that you can see the mosaics and walk alongside them. The columns have been re-erected, and this right here is a famous mosaic called the Great Hunt, and it is over 60 yards long. That's longer than half of a football field. And it shows all these animals. This is another picture of it that shows the mosaic a little bit better. You can see that there's a lion there, and there's oxen pulling a cart, and there's soldiers and men collecting animals and hunting animals. There's also, you could see them attacking a boar, or the lion attacking people. It was quite fantastic. There's another section where you see this. This is animals being collected. And animals are being collected and put aboard a ship. And then they're being taken off. And there is speculation that part of this senator's, or this noble Roman family's wealth came from the import of animals for the Colosseum, for the shows and the things that were exotic animals for the Colosseum might be. The detail on this is really spectacular. This is a very wealthy person. They have speculated that maybe it is even the original the original owner of the villa, and you can tell by the very opulent clothes he's wearing that he's a person of very high rank. These are soldiers. This is a picture of a goddess, and here she's holding ivory tusks. And this is an elephant. And actually, anatomically, it's pretty accurate. So is the tiger over here. And so that has suggested that a lot of the artisans that did the mosaics for this villa, North Africa was known for having some artisans, mosaic artists of great talent. And it's believed, considering they knew the anatomy of animals so well, that it may very well be with Sicily sitting in the Mediterranean between Europe, the end of the very tip of Italy, and the North African coast, that it very well could have been African artisans who created most of these spectacular mosaics. This is the floor of one of the rooms, and you can see how amazing this is. Here animals are being brought, and there's a dog, and there's also some other hunting scenes. This is not part of the Great Hunt, but just one of the rooms that are decorated. Here is a man killing a boar. That is a huge wild boar. This poor soul got attacked. And look, even the dog is helping to bring down the boar in the hunt. And the dog is attacking as they try to bring down the boar. Very interesting. Here is another picture of a cart. And these are oxen that are pulling the cart. Soldiers on horses. Here we have a leopard that is attacking a gazelle. And here's a lion that's attacking a gazelle. I think it's a gazelle. Could be an impala. I'm not sure. And it looks like these two soldiers, these two men are hunting, I think. Here we have some men on a boat. It looks like they're loading the horses right here. And there is much activity in the background. But look at the detail on the faces. I thought it was just fantastic. Here's a close-up of one of the other mosaics, sort of one of your more ordinary mosaics. Not ordinary at all. This is a seascape right here. If you look, there's the water, and everybody's in boats, and there's lots and lots of fish. And then there's the buildings of the harbor, surrounding the harbor here. Quite fascinating. You can see, you kind of get a view into another room where the mosaics are just as spectacular. Here they are fishing, and they're pulling in, I don't know, they're little cherub people, and they're pulling in fish with their nets. Another picture of a room. This too is, it's just everywhere. The detail, look at this detail, is quite remarkable. Now, one of the most unusual finds is this is the first place that we've ever seen women engaged in athletics. This is women. Men would have done these. We've seen lots and lots of images from probably even 800, 1,000 years before of men engaging in gymnastics. But here we have women in gymnastics, exercising or doing games to maintain their fitness. It's really pretty spectacular. This woman is throwing something like a discus. This woman is carrying weights. This woman is playing ball. And look at the detail on her. Look at her muscles. She's quite fit, and she's carrying weights, and it looks like she's running. It really is a remarkable thing. There is nothing to compare to it. It's the first time you see women doing these kinds of activities, and I thought that was really pretty fascinating. Well, Valerio was an absolutely wonderful guide, and right before we left, this is me, and by the way, and he picked a local plum, I guess this is, and he peeled it for me, and it was delicious, I have to admit it. And he did get a nice tip. I hope it was enough. He was a delightful man, and it was a pleasure to meet him. Well, from there, we drove all the way over to Palermo as we drove through the countryside, oh, it was just beautiful. I mean, look at that. I had to stop the car so that I could take a picture of it. It's just spectacular. And I think we were here in the heat of summer, so that's why everything is kind of brown instead of being lush and green. But it still is just absolutely beautiful. There's many, many old houses around. But we finally reached toward almost in the evening. Of course, it was a long summer day. We reached Palermo. And this is the city of Palermo. Palermo is basically named it was founded originally in 734 BC by the Phoenicians. They called it Ziz, which means flower, but then it became a possession of Carthage before becoming part of the Roman Empire. It was the Greeks who gave it the name Panomerus, which means complete port. And it's because of this wonderful natural harbor that Palermo has that it was given that name, and why it was the Phoenicians who were ocean-going people, why they had worked there from all that time, and they had found, from way back from the time of 734 BC. Wow. Well, we didn't stay in Palermo itself. We went into the mountains above, and we stayed in a little town called Montreal, which overlooks the city of Palermo. And so driving up through the quaint streets, it was just beautiful vistas. You can see it's getting on toward evening. The main reason we had come to Montreal was we wanted to be sure to see this very famous church here in Montreal. And what happened was when the Arabs, Sicily's been conquered by so many people. And after it was conquered, after the Romans lost control and it was conquered by the Arabs, it was under Arab control for quite a while. And I think about 400 years. Well, the Bishop of Palermo had to move outside of the capital city of Palermo. So he moved up to this church and built a cathedral, and this became his cathedral church, and which was in the mountains just above Palermo. And it was at the time a small church in the village of Montreal. But when the Normans, can you believe the Normans conquered Sicily? But they did. The Normans conquered Sicily in 1072. What, about 10 years or so? 1066, they conquered England. But in 1072, they conquered Sicily. And the Christians went back to the city, and the bishop moved back into the old cathedral. However, because it had played an important part in as the seat for so many years under Arab rule, it was decided King William II, who was one of the Norman kings of Sicily, he decided to build a cathedral here. And this is the outside of it. It wasn't open, so we went on to our bed and breakfast, which was, we had to wander around a little bit in order to find it. But Uncle Chick had made all the hotel arrangements, so we stayed in a second floor B&B. That's our window right there. Our little balcony we had right there by the church was actually very nice. This is one of the rooms we had, and as you can see, it's nice and sparse. It almost kind of felt like staying in a convent or something, but it was very comfortable. Then we walked over to a restaurant that had a gorgeous balcony or patio that overlooked Palermo. And this is the city of Palermo at night. You see there's the bay, the harbor beyond it. It was just a wonderful, wonderful view. The next morning we got up and we went to the church. This is the piazza in front of the church. Not that busy early in the morning, but we went and got breakfast, and the Italians always have coffee and sweets for breakfast. Uncle Chick said they live on caffeine and sugar. He said he noticed that about their breakfast. Their breakfast doesn't usually contain much protein, but they may eat breakfast twice in the morning, once then and once, they eat a couple of breakfasts, I suppose, to get their sugar and caffeine high. And so we had coffee and croissants. They were delicious. And then we went to the church. Now the church is nice, but not that impressive on the outside. I had, you think. But, this is William II. He has a statue of himself in front of the church. This is a model of the church, and he wanted to preserve the moment when he presented it complete to God. But the doors are spectacular. These are bronze doors, and they date back to the time the church was built, which was in the 11th century. And they are huge. These doors have panels that depict many stories from the Bible. And you can see, I can't pick out the particular stories, but it really was amazing. But these doors are nothing compared to what's inside the church. Mosaics again. But now we're talking about mosaics from the late Byzantine time period, and they were brought here in the Middle Ages. It's a crossover between the Byzantine and the times and the Middle Ages, and the artisans that they have. The church is built in very much a Romanesque style, which means it has all these columns down, and it has the high windows. In the later in the Middle Ages, they would learn how to build buttresses, and that's when you get all the fantastic stained glass windows, when they know how to build walls with big openings and not fall like Notre Dame. So every surface is just spectacular. I look at this and I remember, most people in a village or in a town, most people were peasants, they were farmers. They would rarely even see things with bright colors, much less to see this much gold. And they would walk in a place like this, and it must have been overwhelming. And remember, they couldn't read, but their Bible and all the stories of the scriptures were told to them, laid out in the mosaics. And that's what this church is really famous for, were these fantastic mosaics. This is the floor. This is Christ as the Pancreator. Over there, very common to see the Christ as the Pancreator, the creator as seeing him sort of like as he will appear at the Last Judgment. They speculate over an altar is a very common theme in many, many churches. Across here, we have all these biblical stories. And actually, Uncle Chick was patient enough to sit there, and he wanted me to interpret every Bible story. Fortunately, I wasn't that far out of seminary, and I didn't embarrass myself. I was able to tell him all about the Bible stories and what I recognized almost all the mosaics. This is, for instance, this section is Noah's Ark. Here they are gathering the animals. Here they are floating upon the waters, and Moses is sending out the bird. And here they're exiting the ark. And you see, you could tell the whole story. I could just picture peasants telling the whole story, people who couldn't read, telling all the Bible stories to their children and passing the scriptures on that way. It's really very, very impressive how well this is done. Look at the detail on the animals. Of course, you can see that things are different from the times of those mosaics that were done 800 years earlier, the ones at the villa. Now these mosaics are just beautiful. Here we have Jesus raising Jairus' daughter. Little girl, get up, Jesus said. And this is the area over the altar. Once again, it's spectacular. I mean, they believed that heaven had golden light, and I can imagine someone who's never seen this kind of thing, that it would look almost like I was glimpsing heaven as I looked up. It was truly spectacular, and I really, really enjoyed visiting this church. Here's the detail of Christ as the Pancreator. This is Uncle Chick right here. He'd be unflattered by that picture. But this is the back of those great bronze doors I told you about. They go up at least 2.5 times taller than he is. And he's a good 6 feet in order to get out. But you can see how ancient the doors are. Then we walked up, and you could walk across the roof, which was quite interesting. This is the outside of the church, and as I said, the outside of the church is not very impressive. But this is a Benedictine cloister, a medieval cloister that was built probably in about the 13th century. Just spectacular with these Romanesque columns all the way around. This is just the way the Benedictines lived in their cloisters and in their time of prayer. They practiced the service of the hours, which means that they prayed about 6 times a day, and they would gather for prayer. And Benedict believed in a balanced life between work and prayer and rest, and he also believed in poverty, chastity, obedience, and stability, which means you stayed where you were and you learned to worship God where you are. As we went through a section. It was kind of creepy, but we went through one section in order to get to another, the real viewing area. Here's Uncle Chick. It was quite a climb. But this is the daytime view of Palermo. Not unlike the nighttime view we'd seen the night before from a restaurant lower down. As a matter of fact, I think this right here might be the restaurant where we were, but I'm not sure. But it was somewhere in that area. Well, we went down to Palermo and began to examine Palermo. Palermo has a population of 1.3 million people, and it is quite interesting. This is the great Cathedral of Palermo, the one that the bishop was forced to leave under Arab rule, but came back. And it was greatly built and expanded, but you can see sort of the Arab influence on it. Sicily is an interesting blend because of its long time of Roman rule and Arab rule and then Norman rule and then back to Italian rule. It was an independent nation for a while, and then it was part of another nation with southern Italy, and then it became part of the United Italy. Very interesting. I was trying to get artistic here because the flowers were so beautiful. This is the inside of the church. It is Baroque, and it's a little. It had been redone several times. And this is the inside of the great cathedral. But some things are just things they never change. This is an ancient lock. This lock was probably a good foot across. It was huge. I can't imagine carrying the key that was used to open it. This is one of the altars, and it's made of silver. Really spectacular. This is the part of the piazza. There are many piazzas in Palermo. And this one was particularly nice, I thought. Oh, then we were walking down the street, and then here comes some people marching. And I asked my uncle, what are they marching for? And they said, oh, they're on strike. On any given day, somebody's on strike. Almost every day in Italy. This is one of the famous corners because all four buildings look the same. It's quite attractive. Here's a better shot of one of the buildings, but all four of them have this curved front and they look the same. Quite impressive. Oh, the food in Sicily was wonderful. The fruits and vegetables couldn't be more delicious. I think Sicily provides a lot of the fruits and vegetables for Italy and for much of Europe. Now this was a very interesting church. This little church right here is the is San Cataldo. San Cataldo. It was built around 1154 by Malone Barry, who was the prime minister of King William I, also known as King William the Bad. And that's King William of Sicily, remember, one of the first Norman king of Sicily. The church is never been modified. This is the way it looked when it was first built in 1150. And it was never even given electricity. It's just very plain. It was a Crusader church, and actually it was a religious seat of the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, which was one of the Crusader knights. So it's considered a Crusader church. The inside was just beautiful. The lighting is perfect. It's been untouched for centuries. For 1,000 years, basically. And they had soft chant, like Gregorian chant, monks chanting, playing in the background. I just thought it was so lovely. Well, we continued to walk around Palermo, and this is, I think, a music hall. I'm not quite sure, and one of the great triumphal arches there. And here is a government building. My mind's a little slow on this, but I think this is like City Hall. I'm not sure, but one of the government buildings. The streets were filled with tourists, but not overly crowded. It was a nice time to travel. And of course, walking around, you got to stop for gelato. That's one thing I can always count for with my Uncle Chick. We will stop for gelato. Gelato was really super good. I know why they insist on calling it gelato and not settling for just ice cream, because they feel like it's a class all of its own. We walked down by the waterfront, and the local boats were painted, and they were so pretty. It was quite nice. And this is one of the lighthouses. There were many lighthouses here. The Phoenicians, I think the Carthaginians built the first lighthouses to help show people where the harbor was. I doubt it looked like this, but still, it's an amazing history. And Palermo was just full of so much history and so much beauty. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. I still have more slides to show you from that trip. I hope you're not too bored. But next week, I'll talk about the rest of our trip to Sicily. I hope you enjoy it, and until next week, God bless you.